Russia running out of ammunition and armored vehicles in Ukraine. Russian troops fighting in Ukraine are disillusioned with the old vehicles they are forced to use because of huge equipment losses, according to British defence officials. The UK Ministry of Defence said on Thursday that in the middle of October, Russian forces were losing more than 40 armoured vehicles a day, which is roughly the equivalent of a battalion's worth of equipment. Meanwhile, over recent weeks Russia has been forced to turn to Belarusian stocks to acquire at least 100 additional tanks and infantry fighting vehicles. British defence officials said that the Russian troops are likely frustrated that they are forced to serve in old infantry combat vehicles which they describe as aluminum cans. With armoured units and artillery key to how Russia fights the war, it said that its forces are struggling partially due to difficulties in sourcing both artillery ammunition and sufficient serviceable replacement armoured vehicles. Newsweek has contacted the Russian Defence Ministry about the daily British update which emphasises Russian losses and Ukrainian gains. As of Thursday, the Oryx website, an open-source outlet that tracks military equipment usage and losses, said that since the start of the invasion Russia had lost 1,420 tanks and 684 armored fighting vehicles, including destroyed, damaged and captured vehicles. Since the partial mobilization was announced, many Russian conscripts have complained of being given inadequate or no equipment. Some are paying for their own thermal underwear and even body armor. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov acknowledged last month that Russia does not have enough equipment for its mobilized soldiers following a draft in which it said 300,000 reservists had been called up. He said that a council created by President Vladimir Putin was working on trying to rectify the situation. On Tuesday, the Russian-installed head of the partly occupied Ukrainian region of Kherson, Vladimir Saldo, told Russian state TV program Solovyev Live that there were problems with training and equipment. Russia's problems with kitting out its forces come as fresh attacks by Putin's troops were reported across Ukraine. The Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, Europe's biggest, has been disconnected from the power grid after Russian shelling damaged the remaining high-voltage lines and left it just with diesel generators, according to Ukraine nuclear firm Energoatom. Russian strikes were also reported in the central Ukrainian city of Kryvyi Rih and in Sumy and Kharkiv in the northeast, with heavy fighting ongoing in the eastern regions of Luhansk and Donetsk. Meanwhile, Ukraine's Southern Command said on Thursday its forces had carried out 150 fire missions and an airstrike in the south, destroying 4 Russian ammunition depots and tanks carrying fuel. Russia abandoning checkpoints in Ukraine as flags pulled down in Kherson. Russian troops are reportedly abandoning checkpoints in the occupied Ukrainian region of Kherson, as images circulating on social media appeared to show that a Russian flag had been pulled down from the city council building. Yuri Sobolevsky, the deputy head of Kherson's regional council, posted a photo on his Telegram channel that he says was taken on Thursday. Kherson Oblast State Administration. The photo was taken today. The mysterious disappearance of you-know-what, Kherson was, is, and will be only Ukrainian. And if not us, you, Russian forces, will take off your rags, Russian flags, he wrote. A Russian Telegram channel said on Thursday that a Russian flag has been removed from the administration building in Kherson, while Russian war correspondent Alexander Kotz also confirmed the flag's absence. Kotz, the military correspondent for Russian outlet Komsomolskaya Pravda, posted a video on his Telegram channel showing that the flag is no longer flying on the Kherson administration building, but it is on a building across the street. Jimmy Rushton, a Kyiv-based independent foreign policy and security analyst, said something very interesting is happening in the city of Kherson. Russian flags at checkpoints and over the city administration building have disappeared, he tweeted. Checkpoints that were once manned by Russian troops are now abandoned. Rushton shared a clip he said showed Ukrainian civilians in Kherson riding on a bus filming a checkpoint previously occupied by Russian troops. They cheer when they realize it's now been abandoned, he wrote. In late October, the Kremlin-installed administration of Kherson was evacuated to the east bank of the Dnieper River, as Ukrainian forces advanced as part of a counteroffensive to recapture the region, which became of the first areas to be seized by Russian troops in the war. Some 70,000 people have already been evacuated, and Vladimir Saldo, Kherson's Russian-installed head, said on Tuesday that he decided to extend the evacuation zone by 15 kilometers, 9.3 miles, from the Dnieper. He said on Russian state TV program Solovyev Live that the evacuation will affect the Novokakhovka urban district, and the Ola Pristan, Olishki, Kakhovka, Hornostavka, Velika Lepetayka and Verkhnyi Royakik administrative regions. Kirill Stremausov, deputy head of the Russian-appointed military-civilian regional administration, was cited by the Russian state-owned news outlet Kommersant on Thursday as saying that Russian troops are likely to leave Kherson and go to the East Bank. Most likely, our troops will go to the left bank part of the Kherson region. Those people who did not have time to move from Kherson should leave as quickly as possible, he said on Solovyov Live. Russian officials have yet to comment on the disappearance of the Russian flag from the city council building. Russian troops demand promised enlistment money from superiors. A video appearing to show Russian soldiers confronting their superiors about the money they were promised has gone viral on Twitter. According to the English translation provided with the video, the soldiers are complaining that their families were not given the 300,000 rubles, roughly $5,000, that they were promised for joining the Russian army. Twitter user Dmitry, who is with War Translated, an independent project concerned with translating various materials about the war into English, shared the video on Wednesday morning. It has already been viewed more than 150,000 times. Russian Mobiks, mobilized troops, are demanding the promised one-off payment of 300,000 rubles, which the military rep says was never actually promised to them, the tweet accompanying the video read. There were multiple reports earlier in the war that volunteers were promised significantly higher wages than average salaries for joining the Russian war effort. In July, CNN reported that volunteer battalions from the city of Perm, which is near the Ural Mountains, along with battalions from Kirov in western Russia, were offering a monthly salary of 300,000 rubles, which is just under $5,000. According to that same report, battalions in Bashkortostan, which is near the Kazakhstan border, were offered a slightly lower monthly pay of 280,000 rubles, which comes to just over $4,500. The report added that Bashkir people from that region were also promised an additional 8,000 rubles, about $130, daily for combat operations. An International Business Times, IBT, report from April said Chechen leader Ramzan Kadyrov allegedly promised volunteers a one-time payment of 300,000 rubles, about $3,700, to fight in Ukraine. The video that was shared on social media seems to indicate that the promised payments haven't been made, at least in the case of the soldiers shown in the video. One soldier, who was not seen on camera, shouted, "No one was chasing us. I came all the way from Moscow to my native town to be mobilized with my friends because of motherland, and because the president, Vladimir Putin, made an appeal to everyone," the voice on the video continued, according to the translation. "I came to the enlistment office, and the Voenkom, the military commissar, explained to me that as soon as we get there, within 2 to 3 days we'll get a one-off payment of 300,000 rubles. A uniformed person standing in the center of a circle of troops, who was apparently a military representative, dismissed the claims and said this never happened. A second military representative attempted to respond and said, "Now, regarding the 300,000, the deputies of the Communist Party submitted a bill to the State Duma. It only passed one reading, and was taken off the agenda, the 300,000. Guys, understand one thing, I didn't promise you 300,000. A soldier can be heard shouting in response, "Well, then they, members of the State Duma, should give up their party membership card and go instead of us. That's obvious what you're trying to tell us here. It's that we've been simply F over." Soldiers then started to demand that someone be sent to them to answer their questions regarding pay as the video ended. Belarusian troops will flee immediately if sent to Ukraine.